All right, happy to have on Adam Jaksa, voice of the Chippewas, the radio play-by-play man for Central Michigan. Adam, thanks for joining us. How are you, man?
Hey, I'm good, Jeremy. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to make my first trip to Champaign this weekend. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so take me in a little bit. Jim McElwain obviously became a big name when he was the head coach at Florida, but he served longest in his career at Central Michigan. So how would you characterize, his tenure now in year 6?
Yeah, I think he would probably tell you the same thing. It's been up and down. He had a great start in 2019. He took over a one-win team in 2018 and took them all the way to the MAC championship. COVID was kind of crazy. He sent a lot of the freshmen home because he didn't think we were going to have a season until we played a few games in November. Then 2021, they win 5 straight to end the year and win the Sun Bowl championship, beating then Power 4 Washington State. But then we had 2 tackles that were drafted in the NFL after that year, and we just haven't looked the same since then. So a couple of losing seasons in 2022 and 2023. First time Central Michigan, a prestigious program in the MAC, has had back-to-back losing seasons since Dan Enos' first 2 years in 2010 and 2011. So this is a prove-it year for Coach Mack. He's had some good seasons. The last 2 have been uncharacteristic of him and this program. He's said it many times. He can't remember the last time he's had back-to-back losing seasons in his coaching career. So he said it's embarrassing. He owes this community. And I know that they're extra hungry because they bring back a lot of starters on both sides of the football. So a lot of guys have gone through the ups and downs of those last 2 seasons. So there's certainly some intensity from the fan base up here. There's some urgency, I guess would probably be the right word, to get back to winning, because that's what's expected in this program that traditionally has been a football powerhouse in the Mid-American Conference.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Adam, we'll talk about the first 2 games here in a second, but what were the expectations for Central Michigan coming into the season?
Win the MAC. Every single year, it's win the MAC. There is no expectation lower than that. That's the barometer that coaches and players before this program currently have set the standard. I mean, you've got Roy Kramer, who's one of the most lauded individuals in college football. He was an AD down in the SEC, won a national championship with CMU back in 1974 to get them promoted to Division I in 75. Herb Duramity absolutely dominated the Mid-American Conference and is the Mid-American Conference's all-time winning coach. Those 2 statues stand right in front of the stadium. So you do just like they do at Illinois, right? You follow the past and the successes, and the expectation here is to win the MAC. And they were picked 8th in the Mid-American Conference. And again, that's based on how they finished the last couple of years. So they've got to go out, prove it, and they've got the most difficult schedule in the Mid-American Conference this year.
So, Adam, everything seemed to go right for Central Michigan. Its opener, 66-10 over Central Connecticut. And then everything seemed to go wrong in their loss at Florida International, 52-16. What have you learned about the team so far?
Well, I remember a child at one point being a youngster riding a teeter-totter. That's kind of how I feel through the first 2 weeks. Like you said, I mean, CCSU isn't very good, obviously, but I think that's a lot to Central Michigan, the way they played. They played great in all 3 phases with some returners, as mentioned, but also some new players in significant spots, like a Joe Labas at quarterback, like a Solomon Davis at wide receiver, and some others. So then I think it's stacked up nicely in the non-conference. You get progressively more difficult, right? You start with FCS at home, get your first challenge on the road against a program that hasn't even been around for 25 years, and then you go to a top 25 team, or should be top 25 team in Illinois this week. So last week, though, was they didn't take care of the football. They didn't look like a disciplined team. They had 10 penalties, 6 turnovers. It wasn't for lack of effort. But they did look shell-shocked, and it got out of hand early. And then, as you know, Jeremy, especially with a run-first coach in Brett Bielema, when you get down by a ton, you can't stay balanced. You can't run the football, and there's a lot of pressure on a guy like Joe Labas, who's making just his 3rd collegiate start and just his 2nd start at CMU. So I think them getting out of the balanced attack and having to throw certainly threw off their offense. And he ended up making mistakes, and then things just compounded from there. And all of a sudden, going to a team that had won 4 games last year and a game that CMU was favored by as many as 7.5, you ended up getting bludgeoned down there. And 39 of those 52 points for FIU came off Central Michigan turnovers. Now, that's certainly not to say FIU doesn't deserve a ton of credit, because they do. Their defense was outstanding. But a lot of self-inflicted mistakes is what CMU's looking at in the tape from last week and trying to correct before they get ready for a big test on Saturday.
You mentioned Joe Labas, Iowa transfer, a 4-star prospect coming out of high school. And I watch him, Adam. I'm like, there's talent there. Like there's arm talent. But he has 5 touchdowns through 2 games, but he had 5 interceptions against FIU, and it just seemed like quicksand. Like he made one mistake and just compounded it with another. But what's he bring to that position, and what's he got around him in terms of playmakers?
Yeah, I think people forget Ohio is one of the best states in terms of athleticism for high school football and just sports in general. Joe Labas, when he came out as a senior, he was the #1 rated quarterback in the state of Ohio. I mean, he was a big-time recruit. The Hawkeyes got him. CMU recruited him, but as soon as he got those Power 5 offers at that time, he didn't really stand much of a chance. So they're happy to get him, and he won the job in fall camp. You know, he's coming in. Bert Emanuel Jr. was kind of the guy last year that was flirting back and forth, ton of athleticism. Joe beat him out. Bert has been hurt. And Joe's pocket presence has been really good. He just looks comfortable back there as a quarterback. He can move around a little bit, maybe not as much as Altmaier can, but if things break down, you know, he can extend the play, and he looks comfortable throwing on the run. And then that first week, and even some of the throws last week, Jeremy, I mean, yes, he had 5 picks, but he dropped in some nice long balls. And again, FIU, I think maybe the strength of their defense is their defensive back. So the receivers for CMU, they didn't have a ton of room. So there were some tight windows that Labas was able to find. So I think he throws a good ball. He can hit his slants. He can hit his short stuff, but then he can connect on the deep stuff as well. And I think hopefully maybe some of the early road jitters of just his third start is what we saw last week, and we can put that behind. But I think he's a pretty good quarterback. I think he's a good MAC quarterback. And you mentioned the options he's got. Chris Parker is a guy that returns. He had about 500 yards last year with 3 touchdowns. He had a touchdown, deep touchdown late in that game on Saturday. Solomon Davis is a first-year transfer from Valpo. Ton of speed. It's what they needed. Coach McElwain has said it the last couple of years. They need to get a guy that can take the top off the defense and that you can find deep. So he's an option there. And then you've got Stephon Bracey Jr. He's a second-year transfer from Wisconsin. I think he maybe struggled a little bit to get acclimated with the program last year. He's a Grand Rapids kid, so he's back in his home state. Dropped some balls. Also, the production wasn't as good last year. Efficiency lies with the offense. He looks much more comfortable. He's made some big catches. So those are a couple. And honestly, they've spread the ball around to a couple others as well. Evan Boyd, Jesse Pruitt, and Jordan Williams has also made some catches. So I think we're still trying to figure out through the first few weeks who are going to be the main pass catchers here in 2024.
The trenches always seems like, Adam, where these matchups against Big Ten teams are toughest for the MAC. How's Central Michigan kind of stack up on the offensive and defensive lines?
Yeah, up front, CMU is they've been one of the better MAC teams up front, producing NFL offensive linemen. Again, they sent their 2 starting tackles that are now starting in the NFL back in 2021. Eric Fisher remains the still only first overall pick out of the MAC back in 2013 when Kansas City took him, and it's just continued on from there. So they've got another one this year, and Braden Swartout, he's the right tackle. He is the most talented, and he is having scouts look at him to potentially be in the NFL. I heard Brett Bielema say it, and he's right. Their center, Dominic Serapiglia, is his second-year transfer. He's really good, really smart, kind of the leader up front, the quarterback, if you will, that's helped Joe Labas settle in his first year in the offense. And then Davis Heinzen is another returner that's been on that line since the 2021 Sun Bowl, when actually those 2 tackles sat out in that game to get ready for the draft. So They stack up, I think, pretty well. But this is a Big Ten team that they're facing, and I know how much Brett stacks those lines and how important it is to him. So it's going to be a big challenge on Saturday. And they haven't really run the ball super effectively through the first 2 games. I think some of that is the way that the games went. That first game, CCSU looked at the tape last year. Bert Emanuel Jr. is a great runner. He's a great athlete, but he struggled to throw the football last year. So they're thinking they're going to see him. Instead, it's not him. They stack the box, and CMU's dinking and dunking and throwing for 300-400 yards through the air. Second game, you get so far behind, you kind of take the run game out of it. So I'm curious to see what their run game is going to look like consistency-wise this year, and we'll see how they, again, stack up against a good defense at Illinois. And on the other side, they've got returners on the defensive line. Jonah Pace has been in the backfield, Jason Williams as well, and then you've got Michael Heldman. Those are 3 juniors, a couple of defensive tackles, and a defensive end that have all been in the backfield the first couple of weeks, and they've got high expectations. Rob Akey, good friend of Coach Bielema. He's in his 6th season as the defensive coordinator, and he's a pressure-heavy guy. But it all starts up front with him. When CMU has had an edge rusher or a couple D tackles that can consistently get to the quarterback without having to blitz, their defense has had high marks in 2019 and 2021, even 2020. They were pretty good. So they didn't quite have the rushers they were looking for last year, needed a little bit more, and they feel like they have it. Again, it's tough to judge when you blow a team out and then your team's faced with short fields and trying to recover through 6 turnovers, one that was returned for a pick 6. So still waiting to see on what that unit progresses to be here in 2024 as well.
Yeah, I mean, you dive into the numbers, you watch the game. It's the defense only allowed like 300 yards. It's a Florida International. It was just a lot of short fields. You just had a pick 6 that led to 52 points. So that back end of the defense, Luke Altmaier and his receivers had a really good start to the season. What are they going up against in that linebacker and secondary crew?
Yeah, so the linebacking core for CMU is by far the deepest position group on the team, which is ironic because they lost their starting middle linebacker, Kyle Moretti. He transferred to San Diego State, and the Chippewas will host them next week, so that'll be a fun little homecoming. But the good news, I mean, Leviah Brown, the kid out of Hawaii, they call him Aloha. He has stepped up, had a great fall camp. And Jordan Kwiatkowski, JK, is right there. Those two are the green dot wearers where they'll be communicating with the sideline. They're thumpers. They can get to the ball. They move well. Justin Whiteside, Fernando Sanchez as well. You'll see all of those guys out there in some sort, whether they're in a 4-3, if Illinois is in 12 personnel, or whether they're going 5 DBs with a nickel. And then it starts defensively in the backfield and really on this team with Dante Kent. You'll see him run nickel. You'll see him run corner. He's a former freshman All-American. He's a 2-time All-MAC selection. Outside of Bert Emanuel Jr., who, again, he's been injured. I don't know if we'll see him in any capacity on the offensive side. Dante's the best athlete on the team behind him. He's grown into a leader. The guys really look up to him, and he just finds ways to be in the right spot. So the numbers through the air the last couple of years, they don't look good for CMU because they just have not gotten pressure up front. And those guys have been hanging out there longer than you need to be, especially against guys like Sam Hartman in Notre Dame. They really tore him apart with some big balls last year. So again, it's very important for them to get pressure up front. They don't feel like they're getting home with 4. Rob Akey's not going to be afraid to be aggressive and try and bring in a blitz. But those are guys in the back there that are experienced. Your 2 safeties are returning starters, and Elijah Ricard and Caleb Spann. So they've got experience. Again, it's on 2 seasons that CMU would like to have finished better, but they do feel good about both sides of the ball. It's now just about finding their identity on both sides of the ball. And unfortunately, it's a little bit challenging for MAC teams to find their identity early when you're playing Power 4 opponents like a top 25 Illinois.
One thing I want to mention here, Adam, is their return game is dangerous. If you make a mistake, it seems like they're going to make you pay for it. So they got multiple guys that seem like they can house it.
Yeah, it's a great point. Jim McElwain takes special teams very seriously, and Keith Murphy is in his 4th season as a special teams guy. That's been part of the challenge, the turnover with coaches, because when they had the great seasons in 19 and 21, guys were getting promotions. Keith Murphy has been one of those guys that have stayed, and they blocked 7 kicks a couple of years ago. They've consistently returned punts. They've returned kicks. And they've made some really good plays in those departments as well. So, yeah, Marion Lukes missed the first game, a little bit of a nagging injury, but he got back into the swing of things last week, which is ironic because they took a kick and a punt return back for touchdown, and he didn't even play. So Stefan Bracey took the kick return back. If you remember when he played for Wisconsin, he took one back against Nebraska a couple of years ago. So that was his 2nd kick return. Dante Kent, that great athlete we're talking about, he affected the game in so many positive ways with every punt that he got that first week. He did fumble last week, which was a big bummer because it really swung the tide of that game early, and FIU cashed it in for a touchdown. He was trying to make a play on a short hop that was going to change the field. But they've got speedsters, and Marion Lukes is the main threat. He's been back returning kicks the last few years. So in a game where you're going to probably be out-athleted by a Big Ten team, special teams is certainly a way. I'm sure Central Michigan is going, hey, maybe this is a way that we can change field position and try and hang around with a big play or two.
Adam, before I let you go, and great stuff. NIU showed last week that you can never overlook Maction. So what's the key to Central Michigan really threatening Illinois in this one on Saturday?
Don't turn it over. If you don't turn the football over against Illinois, which I understand that's a massive ask after you turn it over 6 times, I think they feel comfortable coming in here and playing a game and hanging in. I mean, the spread is, just short of 3 touchdowns, as it should be. It's a good team in Illinois. I will not be surprised to see you guys ranked in the top 25 when things are all done. But they're no stranger to hanging around and playing in these games. And, I was listening to Coach Bielema's show last night. He said the same thing. I mean, they were in the game last year at Notre Dame late. They were in the game late in East Lansing against Michigan State. They went to Happy Valley in front of 100,000 a couple of years ago. That was a game late until they turned it over a couple of times. This is kind of what MAC teams do. I mean, Toledo last year comes into Champaign and it takes a last-second field goal to win that one. NIU, which is not even projected to win the league, goes and beats Notre Dame. So these MAC teams, they have talent, and they produce a lot of NFL guys, and they come in with a chip on their shoulder. I mean, this is an opportunity for them to showcase their skills in front of these awesome stadiums and awesome crowds, and they know that if they catch you on that Saturday, they are going to be the talk of that Saturday and that week. So I think they get up a little bit extra, even though when you ask them about it, it's just another game. It's just another stadium. It's just another opponent. They know deep down if they go to Illinois and win, that's a big moment. So certainly it's a tall task, and Illinois looks sound in all 3 phases. And Central Michigan, they've knocked off some big opponents. Washington State in 2021. They whooped on Kansas back in 2017. That crazy comeback in Stillwater against Oklahoma State against the top 25 team in 2016. They have not beaten a Big Ten team since they went to West Lafayette in 2014 and stomped Purdue 38-17. So it's been a decade. And Jim McElwain has not won a road Power 4 now conference game, non-conference game since he got here. So things are stacked up against him, but you never know. If they don't turn it over, I think there's a chance that they could play a competitive game. We'll see what happens.
Adam Jaksa, voice of the Chippewas. Adam, thank you for the insight on Central Michigan. We really appreciate it. Safe travels to Champaign. We'll see you on Saturday, man.
You bet. Thanks so much for having me.